Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling a true classic, The Magic of Thinking Big. It's one of those books that just seems to resonate with generation after generation, and we're excited to dig into it today.
I completely agree. It's such a practical guide to, changing your mindset, and Schwartz really gets into the how, which is, sometimes missing from these kinds of books, so it's nice to see.
Yeah, he doesn't waste any time either. Right off the bat, he hits you with this idea of excusitis.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's like the disease of making excuses for why we're not successful, and he really hones in on this idea of intelligence excusitis, where people think they're not smart enough to achieve their goals.
Right, right.
Have you ever fallen into that trap? I feel like we probably all have at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think we all have. But you know what I love about Schwartz? He challenges that idea. He just comes right out and says, look, it's not about how much raw intelligence you have, but how you use it.
Yeah.
It's about thinking critically, solving problems, applying knowledge, not just memorizing facts and figures.
He has this great example in the book about a quiz show expert. This guy could answer all these obscure trivia questions, but then when it came to handling practical problems in a business setting, he just totally floundered. It really drives home that point that book smarts aren't everything.
Exactly. It's really about, like he says, the application of knowledge. And, that leads into his 3 cures for intelligence excusitis, which I think are so valuable.
Oh, yeah, let's hear them.
Okay, so the first one is never underestimate your own intelligence. Or overestimate the intelligence of others, for that matter. Everyone has their own unique strengths, right?
Right.
The second one is remember that a positive attitude can often take you much, much further than just sheer IQ points.
Oh, I love that one.
And finally, and this is really key, focus on thinking. Using your mind to create, to innovate, to problem solve, rather than just memorizing information like we were just saying.
Yeah, it's almost like he's saying we need to become mental athletes. Constantly training our minds to be more agile, more effective.
Yes, exactly. Love that analogy. And speaking of challenges, Schwartz doesn't shy away from tackling the big one, fear.
Fear, oh yeah.
He acknowledges that fear is a major roadblock to success, but he also provides, some concrete steps for overcoming it. I like how practical he gets with that.
He uses this example of a businessman who was extremely shy until he joined the Army. And through his experiences there, in the Army, he realized that people are more alike than they are different. And that was a big turning point for him. It helped him conquer his fear of social interaction.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that finding that common ground and seeing past those preconceived notions can really kind of chip away at that fear.
Absolutely. Because it's like fear often thrives on the unknown, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So when we make that effort to understand others, to see them as individuals, with their own hopes and dreams, it can really make a difference. And that actually leads perfectly into his advice on building positive relationships, which is something he comes back to again and again throughout the book.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
He talks about the importance of thinking right toward people, of genuinely looking for the good in them and not just assuming the worst.
Right.
And he even highlights the importance of giving sincere compliments. He tells this charming story about how an elevator operator started addressing him by name after he gave her a genuine compliment.
I love that.
It just goes to show how these small gestures can make such a big difference in how people perceive us and treat us. It's like that saying, what you put out into the world comes back to you.
It really is. What you put out there, you get back. And, speaking of putting things out into the world, Schwartz is a big believer in action.
Action, yeah.
Taking action. And he makes this clear distinction between activationists, people who are the doers, the ones who make things happen, and passivationists who kind of let fear and procrastination hold them back.
It's almost like 2 different approaches to life.
It is. And he uses the story of Joe College to really illustrate this point. Joe's the student who's constantly putting off studying, letting distractions get in the way. And you know how it is. Ultimately, his inaction leads to poor grades, missed opportunities. It's a cautionary tale for sure about the dangers of procrastination.
It really makes you wonder, how many Joe Colleges are out there letting their potential just slip away because they're not taking action.
So many, I bet.
So how do we break free from that cycle?
Well, Schwartz suggests setting definite goals is a good starting point.
Goals, okay.
Because having that clear target, something to aim for, It gives us direction and motivation. And he shares this really inspiring story of David Mahoney, who achieved remarkable success at a very young age because he had this very clear vision and he set these ambitious goals for himself.
It's like having a roadmap.
Yeah.
Without a destination, it's easy to get lost.
Exactly. And when you know where you're headed, even those small steps forward feel so meaningful.
That's a great analogy. It really is. And speaking of taking steps, Schwartz also talks about this idea of going first class in everything we do. But he's not talking about, fancy cars or expensive vacations. He's talking about something much deeper.
Right. It's more about striving for excellence, doing our best, really, in every area of life.
Exactly. And he uses this really memorable example. It's a busy gas station, and the attendant goes the extra mile. He cleans the inside of the windshield, which no one really expects, but makes such a huge impression. And it creates this sense of loyalty in the customers.
Such a good example of how these small gestures can really leave a lasting impact. It's about exceeding expectations and making people feel valued.
And that, ties into another important concept that Schwartz emphasizes, investing in yourself.
Oh, that's so important.
And he believes that learning shouldn't stop after we graduate. It's a lifelong pursuit.
Absolutely.
He encourages us to embrace evening courses, personal development programs, even just reading widely to expand our knowledge and sharpen our thinking skills.
It's about staying curious, right? Yep. And being open to new ideas and constantly challenging ourselves to grow.
Exactly. And that growth mindset is so important when it comes to what Schwartz calls a progressive outlook.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more about that.
Well, he contrasts the attitudes of 3 different salesmen who were all being considered for a promotion. Yeah. And the one who stands out, the one who really catches the eye of the executives, isn't necessarily the top performer in that moment, but he's the one who shows a willingness to learn, to adapt, to constantly seek improvement.
So it's not just about where they are now, but where they're headed, that potential for growth.
Exactly. It's that drive to be better, to push beyond our comfort zones that really sets successful people apart.
It's so true. And, to do that, to really push ourselves, we need to be mindful of the language we use, both internally, the things we tell ourselves, and externally, how we communicate with others. Schwartz cautions against using language that create these small, negative, defeatist images in our minds.
Oh, I see. Like instead of saying, it's no use, we're whipped, what would be a better way to frame that thought?
Right, exactly. You could say something like, we're not whipped yet, let's keep trying. Maybe there's a new angle we haven't considered. Something more empowering.
Wow, that's a subtle shift. But I can see how the impact on our mindset, and our ability to persevere could be huge.
It really can. And it extends beyond just our words. It's about cultivating a positive environment around us, surrounding ourselves with people and influences that support our growth, that align with our goals. Schwartz talks about this idea of thought poison, those negative limiting beliefs that can kind of seep into our minds from our surroundings.
Thought poison, wow.
He gives an example of a friend of his who's constantly promoting these get-rich-quick schemes and just had this very cynical view of success. And despite having intelligence and potential, this friend just remained kind of stuck in mediocrity because of his negative thinking. It's really sad, but also a powerful reminder.
It is a powerful reminder. It makes you really think about the company we keep, the information we consume, the environments we frequent. Are they fueling our growth, or are they holding us back?
That's a great question to ask ourselves regularly, and it makes me think about the importance of managing our attitudes, which is another key theme Schwartz explores. Our attitudes are like mirrors, reflecting our inner thoughts and beliefs outward to the world.
They really are.
And he gives this great example of 2 secretaries, both answering the phone with the same words. But they're conveying totally different messages,
How so?
Well, one exudes warmth and helpfulness, while the other projects just boredom and annoyance. It's all in the tone, the attitude, and it's a reminder that our attitudes are constantly communicating, even when we're not saying a word.
That's so true. We're always sending signals, even when we don't realize it. So how do we become more aware of the attitudes we're projecting?
That's a great question, and Schwartz actually provides 3 key attitudes to cultivate. The first is, I'm activated. The second is, you are important. And the third is, service first.
Interesting. I'm curious to hear more about how those play out. Let's start with I'm activated. What does that even mean?
Well, Schwartz tells a story from his college days where he really learned the power of being activated. He was in a history class with a professor who just seemed incredibly enthusiastic about the subject.
Oh, I love those kinds of professors.
Don't you? They make all the difference. And this professor's enthusiasm was contagious. It inspired the students to engage more deeply with the material, to really get excited about it.
It highlights the fact that enthusiasm can be so infectious. When we bring passion and energy to our work, to our interactions, it can create this ripple effect of positivity.
Absolutely. And that leads beautifully into the "you are important" attitude. It's about recognizing that everyone wants to feel valued, appreciated, seen. Acknowledging the importance of others, regardless of their position or status, can have a transformative impact on our relationships.
That makes me think of the story about the elevator operator who, after receiving a genuine compliment, started going above and beyond in her interactions.
Exactly. It's a beautiful example of how making someone feel seen and appreciated can make such a difference.
And finally, there's the service-first attitude.
Right. This is a big one for Schwartz. He really argues that focusing on providing value to others, meeting their needs, exceeding their expectations, it's the key to unlocking success. It's about shifting that focus from "what's in it for me" to "how can I serve others?"
That's a powerful shift in perspective, and I can see how that mindset could make all the difference, not just in business, but in all areas of life.
It really can. And to illustrate this point, he shares the story of a service station that thrived, not because of its gas prices, but because of its exceptional service. The attendants were friendly, helpful, always went the extra mile.
It's a reminder that sometimes it's those small acts of kindness, of going above and beyond, that really make the biggest impact.
They really do. And it's interesting because Schwartz is also big on the importance of giving constructive criticism in a way that is both honest and encouraging.
I'm curious to hear more about that, because criticism can be tricky. It's easy to hurt someone's feelings, even if you have good intentions.
It is. But Schwartz actually learned a really effective approach from a successful businessman who believed in the power of positive reinforcement. Instead of just pointing out flaws, he emphasized starting with praise, highlighting what the person was doing well.
I like that.
And then gently point out one area for improvement, offer some guidance, and then end on a positive note.
So like the sandwich, right? The criticism is in the middle, surrounded by positive reinforcement on both sides.
Exactly. And it's a really effective model. It helps people grow without damaging their self-esteem.
That's so important. And speaking of positive qualities, Schwartz also talks about the importance of being likable.
Being likable.
He argues that it makes us lighter to lift, which I thought was a really interesting way to put it.
It is. And, he makes this point that often likability can actually trump technical skills or experience when it comes to promotions, or opportunities.
So people skills really do matter.
They really do. People want to work with, and support those that they enjoy being around. And he shares this interesting observation from his experience working with executives. They often considered a candidate's spouse during the hiring process.
Really? Why?
Because they recognize that a supportive and encouraging home environment could significantly impact an employee's performance and success.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's not just about the individual. It's about the ecosystem they're a part of.
Exactly. It's a reminder that our personal and professional lives are interconnected. And cultivating those positive relationships, both at home and at work, creates a really strong foundation for well-being and success.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems like all of these ideas we've been talking about so far, they really tie back to that core concept of excusitis that we started with.
They do. It's all about taking ownership of our thoughts, our attitudes, and our actions, and not letting those excuses hold us back from achieving our full potential. And, that brings us back to Schwartz's idea about activationists and passivationists.
Yeah, the doers versus the non-doers.
Right.
Wow.
So the activationists, they're the ones taking initiative, making things happen, really getting out there and getting things done.
Not afraid to get their hands dirty.
Exactly. Whereas the passivationists, they're kind of stuck in this cycle of, procrastination, inaction, letting those fears and doubts really hold them back.
He used that example of the college student, right?
Yeah, Joe College.
Yeah.
The one who keeps putting off studying and letting distractions get in the way, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a classic example of, potential just going to waste.
Unfortunately, it's something we see all the time. And Schwartz, he introduces this concept of the action habit, urging us to, break free from that procrastination and really cultivate a bias towards action.
Okay, how do we do that?
He's got this simple but powerful strategy, he says, and I'm going to quote him directly on this one because I love it. He says, I'm in condition right now to begin. I can't gain a thing by putting it off. I'll use the get ready time and energy to get going instead. Oh, I like that. It's so simple, but it's true. Like, why waste that time and energy just psyching yourself out, right? Just dive in.
Exactly. And then he emphasizes the importance of setting those definite goals, arguing that they provide, that direction, that motivation that we need. It gives us a clear target to aim for.
Okay, so goals. We've all heard that before. What makes Schwartz's approach different?
Well, he talks about this amazing story of David Mahoney, who achieved just incredible success, like at a very young age, specifically because he had this really clear vision and set these really ambitious goals for himself.
So he's saying we need to be specific about what we want and not be afraid to aim high.
Yeah, it's about having that sense of purpose, that direction.
Sometimes, though, those big goals can feel pretty overwhelming. What happens when we feel stuck, kind of intimidated by the sheer size of our aspirations?
That's such a good point, because it's easy to get bogged down, right? And Schwartz addresses this perfectly with what he calls the next mile philosophy.
Okay, next mile. I like that already. Yeah, so he encourages us to kind of break down those large goals into smaller, more manageable steps. Kind of like, how Eric Severide, the writer, approached writing a book.
Yeah, what did he do?
So instead of being overwhelmed by the task of writing, a whole book, he focused on writing just 1 page a day.
That's such a great strategy. It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time.
Exactly. And by consistently taking those smaller steps, we eventually, we get to achieve those seemingly impossible goals.
It makes it so much more manageable, right? Because you're not staring at this giant mountain all at once. You're just focused on the next step right in front of you.
Precisely. And he gives another good example of this with his hour-by-hour method for quitting smoking.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard of that one.
So instead of focusing on, never smoking again, which can feel really overwhelming, he suggests breaking it down.
So like not smoking for an hour.
Exactly. Don't smoke for 1 hour. And then another hour. And so on. And by focusing on that immediate goal, that achievable goal, it becomes much easier to stay on track.
It's kind of like tricking your brain into taking those baby steps, right?
Exactly. And those baby steps, they add up, It's about making those big goals feel less intimidating and more attainable.
And, this idea of making things more attainable, it reminds me of another thing Schwartz talks about, going first class in everything we do. But, again, he's not talking about, luxury or material possessions.
No, for sure. It's not about that at all. It's about putting your best foot forward, about striving for that excellence.
Quality over quantity, in a way.
Yeah. And he brings up that great example again about that service station that thrives because of its customer service, right? The attendants are going the extra mile, making sure everyone feels valued.
It's about exceeding expectations, right?
Right. And it shows that investing in quality, whether it's in the products we buy or the services we use or the relationships we cultivate, it pays off in the long run.
I think it also sends a message about how we value ourselves and our time, too.
Absolutely. And, speaking of investing, Schwartz is really big on this idea of investing in ourselves through continuous learning.
Lifelong learning, yeah. I'm a big believer in that, too.
And he kind of challenges this traditional notion, that education is just about formal degrees. Like you go to school, you get your degree, and you're done.
Right, which is so outdated, right?
Totally. It's a lifelong journey. He highlights the value of, taking those evening courses, joining personal development programs, even just reading widely to expand our knowledge and really hone our thinking skills.
It's about staying curious.
Exactly. And recognizing that there are just so many opportunities for growth and development beyond the classroom.
I think the internet has really opened up a whole new world of learning too, hasn't it?
It has. We have access to so much information now. It's incredible. And it's up to us to really take advantage of that. Schwartz encourages us to think progress, believe in progress, and push for progress in all areas of our lives.
I love that. It's so action-oriented. It's not just about thinking about progress. It's about actively pursuing it.
Yes. And he contrasts the attitudes of those 3 salesmen again, the ones vying for the promotion, remember?
Yeah.
And he highlights the one who stood out not just because of his current performance, but because of his willingness to learn, to adapt. He had that forward-thinking approach.
Yeah. So it was about potential and a growth mindset rather than just past performance.
Exactly. He was hungry to learn, to improve, to keep pushing himself. And that made all the difference.
It's inspiring, isn't it? It makes you want to examine your own attitudes and see where you could be more proactive, more growth-oriented.
It really does. And it's interesting because he also introduces this concept of the be human approach, which is really about treating others with kindness, empathy, respect.
That seems like a no-brainer. But why does he specifically call it out?
Well, because it's not just ethically sound, it's actually strategically advantageous.
So kindness is good for business.
It can be. He gives this example of a manager who goes above and beyond to support an employee who's being let go.
Really? That's pretty unusual.
It is. He even helps him find a new job. And, this act of compassion, it not only helps that employee, but it also creates a much more positive and supportive work environment for the rest of the team.
That's a great point. It's about building a culture of support and respect, even in difficult situations.
Exactly. It's true leadership in action. And, it's interesting how those small gestures can go such a long way. Like Schwartz talks about the impact of giving sincere compliments, calling people by their names, and celebrating their successes.
Little things that make a big difference.
Exactly. It's about making people feel seen, valued, appreciated. And, on the flip side, he also provides this really valuable 4-step formula for offering constructive criticism.
Oh, that's so important because, as we were saying earlier, criticism can be tricky. You want to be honest, but you don't want to crush someone's spirit.
Right, exactly. So his formula is, first, have that conversation privately, show respect for the individual. Second, start by praising their strengths, acknowledging their contributions, before gently pointing out one specific area for improvement.
Okay, so start with the positive.
Yes. Then, offer some guidance, some support. And finally, end on a positive note, reinforcing their value and potential.
So it's like a sandwich. Again, positive, then the constructive feedback, then positive again.
Exactly. I love that analogy. And it's a really thoughtful approach because it allows for that honest feedback without diminishing the individual sense of worth.
It's about helping them grow, not tearing them down.
Absolutely. And, it brings to mind this powerful quote from Publius Syrus that Schwartz includes in the book. He says, "A wise man will be master of his mind. A fool will be its slave."
Wow, that's really powerful. It really gets to the heart of what we've been talking about today.
It does. It's a reminder that our thoughts, they really do shape our reality. And by mastering our minds, by cultivating those positive and empowering beliefs, we unlock that potential for success, and fulfillment. And that's what it's all about. And it really is amazing how our thoughts can shape our reality, isn't it? Like, we can choose to focus on the negative or we can choose to focus on the positive. And that choice really makes all the difference.
It's like we have this incredible power within us to kind of direct our own destinies, just by changing the way we think.
Exactly. And Schwartz really hammers that home. He says, a wise man will be master of his mind. A fool will be its slave. And that's such a powerful reminder because it's true. We can either be in control of our thoughts or let them control us.
So how do we become masters of our minds? What are some practical steps we can take?
Well, I think it starts with awareness,
Yeah.
Just being mindful of the thoughts that are running through our heads. And when we notice those negative, self-defeating thoughts creeping in, that's when we need to consciously choose to challenge them.
So it's like catching ourselves in the act, right?
Right.
And then what do we do once we've identified those negative thoughts?
Well, Schwartz suggests a few things. We can try reframing those thoughts, looking at the situation from a different perspective, maybe finding the silver lining. We can also try replacing those negative thoughts with positive affirmation.
Oh, affirmations. Yeah. I've heard about those. But do they really work?
Well, I think it depends on the person, But for some people, they can be really powerful tools for shifting their mindset. Because when you repeat positive statements to yourself over and over, it can start to sink in, It can start to change the way you think and feel about yourself and your abilities.
It's like reprogramming your brain in a way.
Exactly. And another important thing is to surround yourself with positive influences. Spend time with people who lift you up, who inspire you, who believe in you, and limit your exposure to those negative, cynical voices that can drag you down.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right. So choose your company wisely, and also be mindful of the information you consume, the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the shows you watch. Make sure they're feeding your mind with positivity and growth, not negativity and fear.
It's all about creating that positive environment for yourself, both internally and externally.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, It's not going to happen overnight. But every small step you take in the right direction, every time you choose a positive thought over a negative one, you're moving closer to mastering your mind and creating the life you want.
That's so inspiring. And I think it's a perfect note to end on. So thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the magic of thinking big. We hope you found it as insightful and empowering as we did.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, you have the power within you to achieve anything you set your mind to. So go out there and think big.